Dakotah, it's been a journey, man. We have finally gotten here. We've been talking about this for a long time. Here we are in the flesh. Curiosity theory.
Curiosity theory. That's what it's all about. That's the main driver, I think, in my life. Curiosity.
What do you mean by that?
Curiosity. So obviously I used to play football, got injured, and I got really interested in space. And I was just curious about other worlds, felt like my universe ended and the prospect, that we live on a planet. There are these other planets in our solar system, but maybe there's millions, billions, trillions of other planets. It was cathartic for me personally to be able to think about studying those worlds. And it was that curiosity that I chased. I feel like the passion that we talk about, doing something that you're passionate about, if you really dig down, it's something that you're deeply curious in.
But did you always have that curiosity in you, or was that spark always lit? Like, when did that happen?
I think that everybody has that inside them. I think that we all innately have this curiosity. It probably stems from some evolutionary benefit. Our ancestors that were curious, could take a stone and, see that you could use this rock to bash something or to, carve a piece of wood, whatever they were doing. And the ancestors that didn't have that, they just weren't innovative enough. And so I think that we all have it deep down inside of us. And when I hear people talk about something missing in their life, something missing in their relationship, something not feeling right in work, when on paper it should, I almost always go straight towards it's curiosity. Your curiosity is not being invoked. It's not being sparked.
That's exactly how I felt right before I went on that trip to Thailand.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
It was a 40-day excursion all throughout Southeast Asia. I went to Thailand, to Singapore. But before that, I had the studio here in Los Angeles. It was a 2,700 square foot space. Yeah. And I, on paper was on top of the world, man. But it felt like something deep within me was unsettled. I was like, what's wrong? I really couldn't figure out what was wrong.
Yeah. Now, so tell me about that, because I think that that's a place that a lot of people get to where on paper things seem like they should be right, but there's something bubbling up inside you that isn't the case.
Yeah. So I think building a media production company is, in principle, a good thing, right? Like, I always wanted to create media. I always was interested in media. Yeah. But the feeling that I couldn't escape from was feeling like I was building myself an increasingly elaborate prison, where I think from the foundation of what I was trying to build, it wasn't completely aligned with my intellectual interests and my innate curiosity. And so I kind of felt exhausted every day. Like, I didn't feel like I had the energy to execute on the things I wanted to.
So I want to dig into that a little bit. I'm curious about what you just said. As you continue to build this thing, right? You have this idea, you want to be the leader of this production company, you want to make meaningful content, be impactful in some way. And as you begin to grow that, the thing is growing. So you're doing what you want to do. You're becoming financially stable, lucrative, you're getting more and more jobs and projects with big companies. Then what isn't working? Like, what's going wrong there? Because it seems like so much is going right.
Yeah, I felt like I was answering some questions for myself. I was learning things about business and finance and like owning a studio, working with big clients. Yeah. But it just kept feeling like the projects I was doing just weren't me.
Yeah.
And, we talked about this before, this idea of a signal to noise ratio and, being tuned into what that exact signal is for yourself, like your own North Star.
Yeah.
And I think I've always suffered, I guess, gift and a curse from like being frantically moved by not being able to, or by not being aligned with my North Star. Yeah. Feeling like, dang, like something's wrong. Like, whereas other people might not have their curiosity satisfied or not have this part of themselves awakened, and then they just keep going to work every day. Yeah. Like, it felt like for me, I couldn't sleep. Like, I was pacing the hallways. I'm like, what is wrong? Like, something's off. Yeah. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and shoot over to Thailand.
Yeah. That's like a big step, though. I think a lot of people feel that, and when you ignore it for long enough, and it mounts because the way that you feel now is good. You can just project forward. You're going to feel more like that in the future, and people end up in a midlife crisis or a quarter life crisis where they do something drastic.
Yeah, man. And I always think of that old man version of me sitting in that rocking chair.
Yeah.
Like, oh, man, back in my day, I had a chance to do all these things. And just never actually did it. And I was like, I never want to be that person.
I feel that. That's a big fear that I have as well, looking back. And I think that that's important to keep that in mind, that, you know, in the moment, what feels important is that the boxes are being checked, that other people see you checking the boxes. I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
But when it's all said and done and you look back, I doubt anybody is like, dang, I wish more people thought that I was being successful. I wish more people thought 50 years ago that I was fulfilling whatever we have, you know, whatever idea we collectively have about success. But you brought up something interesting before, signal to noise. And this is something that I think is a good metaphor for thinking about the direction that you're going in life. So in astronomy, for example, we get a big telescope. I'm looking at a star. The limits to what I'll be able to say about a planet, a star, a galaxy, whatever, in part depends on my signal to noise. So I'm getting incoming light, we'll call that the signal, but there's also some random fluctuations, some noise. That noise could be from something going on in space, some weird thing happening on the star. It could be from the instrument I'm using, the telescope, right? So there's something that we should be looking at, and there's a lot that we're receiving that's garbage. And when you think about the signal to noise in your own life, you have to be able to figure out what is drawing you where you need to go and what is this random noise that's fluctuating. And if you read into the noise, we call that overfitting. You're overfitting garbage. You're analyzing nonsense, something that has no meaningful information. And it's difficult to get that discernment for when do I listen to that voice inside of me, and when do I ignore this feeling, like this feeling of doubt, of fear, of unworthiness?
Yeah, it seems like you've overcome that masterfully recently, man. Like you found this signal and you saw it through to the end. You got a PhD in astrophysics. Like, got to give a shout out to Dakotah. I'm so proud of you, man. Like, it was amazing, like, obviously being there virtually for the dissertation, watching the defense. And then it seemed like it was a bunch of content that also rolled out after that.
And
I was like, man, does this guy, like, have a content strategy for the PhD? Like, what was your thought process with that?
Obviously, I was thinking about it, right? I've been on TikTok, Instagram, IG Reels, whatever, and I'm always thinking of cool ways to talk about science or to try and highlight what I do. So, I've seen some of the things that people do when they finally get their doctorate or talk about their research, whatever. So I was definitely thinking about things like that. I think one thing in particular that seemed to really resonate with a lot of people, it was a couple hours after I had defended. And to describe that feeling, imagine that you were going to run a race that was going to last 10 years. And then you cross the finish line. And it's like, how do you do, like, that's a lot. It's a monumental dopamine flooding event. And I just thought about the thing that most people could take from a short clip, a little bite-sized sample of what I went through. And it's that I wouldn't be here if that day 9 years ago, I didn't decide that it's possible that I could do that. That, it may take a decade. I was aware at the time. And it may be really hard. I was aware at the time. I didn't know how to do math or anything. I couldn't imagine something harder to do, not knowing how to do algebra, than a PhD in physics, in anything, really. And I think that just knowing that you have the ability to do it is so important. And it touched a lot of people, and I'm really happy. And it's true. It's true. Like, you can do things if you don't stop. Like, if you don't give up, if you start listening to that noise that's saying, it's probably not going to work out. That's just going to stop. You're rejecting yourself.
And it seems like the message that you put out there just resonated with a lot of people. Like, a lot of people are sending you positive messages, asking for mentorship and stuff like that. Right? How does that feel?
It feels really good. It feels validating in a way that feels good. Ultimately, I think something that drives me when I make content in general is to have a positive impact. So even when I do a video debunking some sort of nonsense post or claim, I'm never really trying to come at this "I'm dunking on you" type of thing. I don't like that energy. I want to put out positivity. There's plenty of nonsense, plenty of negativity going out there. So, it means a lot to me if people can get anything from my story, from my path, can learn anything, if I can help people in some way believe in themselves. To me, that's sort of the best thing that I could do as a human for somebody that I don't know.
So how do you not dunk on people, right? Because like you've learned so much about this field, you've gotten so deep into it, and there's probably a lot of misinformation out there that you feel compelled to correct. But how do you go about it in a tactful way that, wins people over at the end of the day and actually gets them to feel convinced?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. One of them is empathy. People don't know the same things. People have all had different experiences. That's real. At the end of the day, if I had your DNA and I had your experiences in life, I would just be you. Like I couldn't judge anything that you did. If I had your experience, I would actually be you. So, it's kind of I see myself. I remember the time when I didn't really know much. I didn't know anything about science. I didn't know anything about math. I knew not to trust authority, right? That was like one of the first things I figured out in life just as a rebellious teenager. But, having empathy, respect for other people, and understanding that most people really are like as smart as one of there's going to be people who are geniuses and people who are on the lower end of things, but most people are around the same area. So I feel like you need to have respect for other people's intellect, their ability to think and process information and understand logic.
Who do you feel like you're talking to when you make your video content? Like, is it a person in particular that comes to mind?
That's a good question. I would say it's myself before I knew what I know now, having studied a bunch of science, right? Like before I knew about exoplanets, what got me interested in the scientific method was science communicators. It was people who could talk about it, but make it a narrative. We're humans, right? We're social. We love stories. The best way to communicate anything is through a story. And so I'm thinking about how to do that, how to tell a story in a short amount of time.
Yeah, man, and I am particularly nerdy about your research. I was super excited when we first met. I'm like, dude, I love exoplanets. Like, I was so excited. We worked on a project together, like a virtual production project. I'm curious, man, like, ironically, I'm curious, what are some of the most exciting developments happening in the exoplanet study right now?
Ooh, there's lots of really cool stuff going on. Mm-hmm. So the James Webb Space Telescope is doing a lot of cool research. Lots of stuff.
What's the James Webb?
James Webb Space Telescope. So it's an infrared telescope that's in space. It's a $10 billion telescope. And if you ask me, the single most impressive piece of technology that humans have created. There's been far more impactful technology that's been creative, but this one to me is impressive in a unique way. It has the ability to see the first light that was ever emitted by stars in the universe, which is weird to think about. Like, how can you see light that was emitted 13 billion years ago? And it's just because that light, once it's emitted, the universe is expanding, takes light time to travel. And this telescope, it's literally capturing the light from some of the first galaxies. But what I really like about JWST is that it can study the atmospheres of planets. So being an exoplanet researcher, I'm thinking about life. I'm thinking about how we can detect it indirectly, how we could detect something that is very different than what we would consider to be life. We're very Earth-centric and human-centric in the way we think about it. But it can study atmospheres and tell us the composition. We haven't really seen anything that interesting. There was this K2-18b research that came out where they were claiming that they saw dimethyl sulfide, which is a byproduct. Yeah, it's a byproduct on Earth from life. But we found it in space before, so we know that it doesn't have to be associated with life. And if you ask anybody in the field that does research, they'll tell you that the detection is insignificant. I think a new research paper just came out that showed that they saw no signs of dimethyl sulfide, basically that it could be explained by a number of things. So it's, the statistical significance just isn't there. So we haven't found anything that I would say is especially tantalizing with JWST, but that's one of the coolest places to kind of get the cutting edge of exoplanet research.
Like the bleeding edge frontier of what we're discovering today.
Yeah.
And, I'm a big sci-fi guy. I love to think about, the far future of new technologies. And I don't know if you've looked into like the next iteration of like the next model of telescope that's going to be released. And do you know anything about that?
Yeah, there's a number of kind of next gen, that are maybe within the next decade or so telescopes. There's a 30-meter telescope. So a lot of telescopes that I use for research are the Keck telescopes. They're about 10 meters, which is enormous, right? 10 meter. What's a meter like this? It's like 10 of these wide, and it allows me to study atmospheres that are hundreds of light years away. But there's plans for a 30-meter telescope. So in astronomy, size of the telescope is everything.
Right, and the mirror too, right?
Yeah.
Like with the James Webb.
Say that again?
Like I think the James Webb, it had like the mirror that folded out, and I know that was a big part of it too.
So when your telescope gets that big and you want to launch it into space, you need a foldable mirror, right? You're not going to launch you don't want to launch it open. Also, you want to be able to, a large telescope, you want to be able to deform to make sure that you can focus all of the light. And instead of building a curved mirror, it's easier to build it in segments like that. So you get those honeycomb segments. Now, the honeycomb segments also fold in on themselves. So that was helpful for JWST. But even the telescopes I use, the Keck telescopes, have that same honeycomb segmenting. And it allows you to deform light that comes in to focus it on a single point, which is what you want to do, right? As light travels, kind of expands. Think about it coming from a star. So you want to refocus it into a single point.
Right. I remember reading about like some early, I think it was like some kind of impact that happened on the JWST like after it unfolded, but it didn't seem to affect the efficacy of the telescope at all.
Yeah, that happens. I mean, there's stuff in space.
Right.
Space is mostly empty and it's really big, so it's not, there's not comets or asteroids that are really hitting it. But yeah, there's going to be little things that hit it over time. The detectors probably are going to they'll have lower and lower quality as time goes on, but it's not really a problem.
Are you worried about an asteroid impact?
An asteroid impact on Earth?
Yeah.
Worried about it. I know for a fact it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. We know it's going to happen. We can just look historically and say that something like that is going to happen again.
And there's like smaller impacts that happen all the time.
Yeah. I mean, in this moment right now, there's something that's entering the Earth's atmosphere. It's probably going to burn up because it's not that big. But, these things happen. If it were, a significant impact, I think it's something that we would just divert. We would shoot something at it, knock it off its course. There's a number of things you could try to do. So, I mean, I'm not really worried about that. Human ending events, I think we can just look at humans for. That's probably the thing that we really want to worry about.
Yeah, we're in an interesting time in history right now, with this whole AI revolution happening, all these new tech tools that are coming out, and it seems like there's a lot of existential dread today in society, and a lot of different new personas, I think, are emerging in the zeitgeist, right? There's like the hardcore anti-AI Luddites, and then there's people that are kind of in between, and then there's the power users and like the pro moving forward in technology people.
And maybe it would be helpful to think about, at least as caricatures, painting what each one of the sides of that look like. And you're much more active on the AI front than I am. So like, how would you describe the sort of very, very pro, very, very anti, and then let me know where you stand if it's somewhere in between.
So I think the pro consumer, the pro power user in this case is a lot of times the Silicon Valley types, right? The folks that are interested in innovation, they want to push the boundaries of technology. They're curious by seeing how far we can go with this stuff, right? And then you have the capitalists that I think are also aligned with those folks that will pour money into it and basically try to see how much money they can make out of using these tools, right? And these people are maybe considering, like, look, I think everyone's a little concerned about safety, and this is kind of in the back of those people's minds more often than not. Now, mind you, a lot of these folks on the leading sides of AI have ongoing conversations with regulators, but regulation today is basically like, well, we don't want to put too much regulation on AI innovation because we want to make sure the United States can compete with other countries.
Yeah.
So, and on the other side of that, I think you have a lot of people that are maybe on the older side, less comfortable with new technology, less comfortable with new things in general, that are kind of like, well, this is just a scary thing to me. I think if we think about when we were younger, it's the same folks that maybe didn't want to jump on the internet, or the same folks that didn't want to use their smartphones, and now they're typing smartphones with one finger.
It's funny that you say that, because the folks maybe that didn't want to jump on the internet, maybe they were right. Like, maybe that was
the Amish, right? The Amish are pretty much offline. They're chilling, and they seem to live a pretty decent quality life. I think.
Is that true? Do you know how many Amish people do you know?
I don't know any Amish people personally, but the things that I've read about them suggest that they live a pretty solid life. I wouldn't know. I'm jacked in the Matrix, man.
I'm deeply jacked in the Matrix for sure.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, how I identify myself on this spectrum. Like, for me, I think my goal with education has always been to empower people with it, right? Like, I love, space and the universe and technology. And, for me, it was always, how do I take it a step further and give people something they can use, right? And it feels like with artificial intelligence, we're more empowered theoretically than ever before if we decide to opt in and become power users of the tools. But a lot of people, I think, avoid jumping in because they might feel like worried about this technology, right? But I think the most empowered position you can be in is learning how to prompt engineer, how to deploy AI agents. These are the kind of things that I'm teaching companies and individuals how to do for themselves now.
That's definitely powerful. And when I think about it, I do try to understand and discern this line between people that are just anti for the sake of newness, which I think is a very natural thing, by the way. Having humans in a society that naturally fall, for whatever reason, on the side of progress or conservatism, not speaking strictly in politics, but in any given area, is important, because otherwise, if you accelerate and go off the rails, you can do something that you can never be undone. A lot of people would say that that's what's happening right now with AI. But if you're too far on the conservative side as well, then you halt progress and you go extinct for the opposite reason. So I think it is important to have both of these. And I myself am always trying to get to the root, like to a more objective, like scientific understanding of what's going on, because a lot of times I'll hear things about AI that aren't true or are very much out of context and meaningless, like the amount of water that an AI server is using, which can sound like a lot because you're used to drinking like a gallon of water a day. And so when you see that it's like 1 million gallons in a year or something like that, you're like, wow, like we're wasting all this water on this. But then you look at the water use for anything else and it dwarfs that. So out of context, when I see that, I'm like, do you really understand? And then that makes me be hesitant to quickly hop on this anti-wagon, just for the fact that I can tell that you're not really knowledgeable about what you're talking about. And there are definitely things in AI that I think are worrisome, like replacing people's jobs. Like that's something that's scary, especially if it's driven purely by the capitalists and the investors who just want to make money, right? So in the utopia, if AI does a lot of the stuff humans don't have to do, we could think of a nice world where humans are just able to be creative and follow their curiosity and their passion. But if we think of a dystopia, then you could think of whoever owns that company with the AI that's doing everything just has all the money, and everybody else is like stuck in this Elysium hellscape on Earth where, you know, Bezos and the guys are up in this floating spaceship doing all sorts of cosmetic surgery to themselves, making themselves look like superhumans, and we're down here like stacking boxes in Amazon factories or something like that.
Yeah, no, so you brought up a lot of interesting things. I think the contextual argument on AI's water usage is actually really relevant, especially when you consider comparing it to the average Google search query. I think that was another, I guess, valid argument from some people's perspective. Like, okay, if I just ask Google to do this thing that I could also ask ChatGPT burns a lot more resources, right?
Yeah.
But again, the context is really important. When I think of generative AI tools being used for media production, right, I'm concerned because I'm in media production. A lot of people might have their jobs become insecure. But when I think about something like a fashion shoot, right, this is a crew of 10 to 20 people. You got models, you got 15 to 20 outfits. A lot of times those clothes get thrown away and not used afterwards. Now you can generate this art, generate the models, and yes, that's controversial for many reasons, but you're also able to save all those resources, and the gas that's burned from all those different cars all come in to converge on this one location. So, those are the kind of cost savings and energy savings opportunities that I think AI can provide for us as well. So it's very important to consider that context when you're, but because it's so nuanced, I think it's just hard to make a blanket argument like people are trying to make.
For sure.
Where it's just like AI is bad, AI is energy consuming to the point. Thank you all so much for joining us with Curiosity Theory, the podcast. Our mission is to bring more intellectual, positive, and rigorous conversation into the zeitgeist.
And at Curiosity Theory, everything is self-funded. So if you would like to support the podcast and support us in our mission for inspiring curiosity in the world, click on the links below.
That it's not worth it.
Which is what people are going to do, right? Pro anything, you're going to find all of the pro arguments that you can make. Anti anything, you're going to find all of the anti arguments that you can make. And really, the only way to come up with a truly nuanced understanding is to kind of understand everything. And there's too much. I mean, there's like new models that are coming out every week.
Yeah,
it's hard for any. Yeah, the VO3. Yeah, that you saw the prompt theory videos.
Yeah, so there was the VO3 prompt theory videos, which I thought were meta because it's like you're having these real videos of people saying, "Hey guys, can you believe people think we're prompts?"
Yeah,
right. But they actually are prompts. And then there's then there's people making real videos that are like, I can't believe this is AI, and it's an actual video, and people are like, I can't believe we're prompts.
I checked out the comments on some of those VO3 videos, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, hey, this seems like strong evidence that we live in a simulation." Yeah, which is a fun. I see the connection being drawn there. Personally, I don't think that it makes sense, but it is eye-opening to see that.
I mean, it's a non-zero chance, right? I mean, but like, what value does that information have for us today?
Yeah, that's a good point. At the end of the day.
This could be a video game. Could be.
If simulation theory is based on the simulation being so good that you can't tell the difference, then what's the difference between reality? Like, there is no difference.
There is no difference. I mean, and we are still hallucinating reality, right? We're brains inside of a casing, and we're seeing things late. Like, there's like a slight delay to everything that we see. So our reality technically is hallucinated by the bias of our perception. But another interesting piece about on the VO3 side is, as a creative person, I want to make short sci-fi films. That was actually part of my self-discovery journey going to Thailand. Some of the most thought-provoking work that I can do is in this entertainment that has like a message encapsulated in it, right? But I think about using AI tools like VO3 to make my own sci-fi, and it seems like more often than not, you don't get a lot of attribution for the work that you make. Instead, you're just promoting the actual tool. Like, I can't, like, how many artists do you know that use something on VO3? You just know the video, right? You just know that VO3 was a tool, but you don't actually know the creator that leveraged it and used it.
No, I definitely see that. So wait, so talk more about that. What I hear is that for you, your curiosity, it pushes you in this direction of wanting to create science content one way or another, or STEM educational content. And for you, it's like a vessel for something else, right? Slicing it with more of the entertainment, the high value production. What's like, tell me about that.
Well, one, I think about the things that inspired me to get into these spaces, right? When I was a kid, The Matrix was like the most profound movie I ever saw.
Yeah.
Right? And it got
Who's
me
your favorite
started-
character?
Man, it's got to be Lawrence Fishburne. It's got to be Morpheus.
Yeah.
Morpheus. I feel like that's my role in the world. Morpheus.
Yeah, I recently saw a video with Morpheus, and somebody was saying that he was like wrong the entire time in the entire movie. And I never really thought about that. He sort of seems like the protagonist, and it's true. And I almost see, not to cut you off with the Matrix, but I think that we all need a Morpheus inside of us who's telling you, no, you're the one. And this like voice, this good angel voice inside you that believes it, that you can do it, that you're capable, you're smart enough. The world needs you. The universe needs you. We need that. But he was like wrong the whole time. He was delusional.
He was technically just another agent in the system, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, he was a real human, but he was being manipulated by these higher interests, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I think, the purpose of his character was to free people intellectually, right? To give them the freedom to explore themselves. And, I think about this in a lot of the work that I do. Like, most of the video work that I started off with was purely educational work.
Yeah.
Like, we've made shows with Discovery and PBS and things like that. But what I realize is, well, with that kind of work, you're only reaching a small subsect of the population that's intrinsically curious all the time.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of times that doesn't get the broader reach that some of these bigger, AAA science fiction titles like Interstellar get.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the other thing that I think about with that is that, people who have this appetite for educational content, like they're just not thinking about things in the same way. Like their brain is not as receptive to changing deeper perspectives on things as they are when they see social commentary content, like stand-up comedy, or like a big science fiction film that makes a public commentary, like The Giver or Hunger Games, right? Like these are fictional concepts that bake their information into this bigger narrative. And when I think about being in this space of education, specifically in AI education or education about innovation, the things I teach about are fleeting. Like the stuff that I was teaching about 2 years ago is now completely obsolete and requires, refreshed content. And so when I think of, the legacy I want to leave, I want to work on stuff that takes multiple years to make so that it can be remembered forever, right? Octavia Butler's science fiction body of work is still relevant today.
Yeah.
Or someone else's depiction of the future from the 1970s, like 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
Like, this is still stuff that's, considered in the zeitgeist today.
Definitely. That's crazy. That the 2001, I remember when I saw it for the first time, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I realized that almost every single sci-fi show, movie that I enjoy has ripped something from that movie. And to be able to, within reason, pinpoint the complications, the ambiguity with AI, and like, a potential negative with what was it, Val or Hal? The AI in 2001.
I think it was Hal.
Hal. I always forget if it was Val or Hal. Hal. It's like, that's wild to think about, that somebody was able to capture that, to touch something that would be relevant, what, now 70 years later? It came out in the 60s.
It's visionary stuff, man. And I think, a lot of the greatest minds of our generation are actually these science fiction authors. That's the argument that I like to make. Because a lot of times, the scientists and engineers that go and try to create these things, like the James Webb Telescope, or pretty much every technological innovation from robotic artificial intelligence to smartphones, was dreamed up in the head of a visionary sci-fi author first, probably decades beforehand. And I think we're in a time period today where we need an injection of optimism about the future. I think there's a lot of folks that feel existential dread, they feel nihilistic.
Yeah.
But, I think that if we can inject some positivity, give people some hope, I think science fiction can do a lot of that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's interesting that you point that out. We get lots and lots and lots of dystopian future sci-fi of how things are going to go wrong. And I love watching those too, by the way. Blade Runner, one of my favorite movies. Obviously 2001: Space Odyssey. I mean, they're all over the place. Hunger Games is one of them as well.
Yeah, and everybody likes to get their fear kind of tapped into. It's a compelling, right? I Am Legend, right?
Black Mirror. I love Black Mirror.
Yeah.
Dope. But what is definitely equally as important is being able to inject some positivity there. And that's not, I guess it doesn't make for as good of a movie because there's not as much conflict.
There's not as much conflict.
And that definitely weighs down on I think the zeitgeist overall. There's this weight of, we constantly see how things are going wrong and how things are going to continue to be wrong.
But here's where I disagree with that. So from an entertainment perspective, conflict is important. The conflict doesn't have to be a dystopian. It doesn't have to be set in a dystopian universe.
Yeah.
You could actually have this super futuristic, advanced, exciting time in the future, and the conflict could be between two characters in the universe.
Yeah. But I agree with you. I can't think of many movies, I'm sure there are some that I'm just not thinking of, that fit that bill, though. Usually, even if it's set in the future and everything seems right, there's like something sinister going on underneath the surface.
There's always some kind of issue, but the issue doesn't have to be with the universe itself. I mean, I think even...
I agree.
Yeah, I think even Interstellar could be a good example of that. You know, like this is like a character's conflict, and they're going on a journey, and but this is an exciting future where we get to travel to these different places. There's these AI robots.
I agree with that. That's my favorite movie too.
Oh, word. Okay, so your favorite movie is an example.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're in Thailand. You had everything's boiled up to the point where you decided that you needed to leave and step away. What did you converge on while you were there in terms of your diagnosis of what was going wrong and what you were going to do to make that right?
Yeah, so I just felt off, you know, and I've actually felt this feeling before. So I remember right before I finished my undergraduate degree, which was marine environmental science, I was going to go into grad school. And I was going to go to law school, actually, for grad school. And I took the LSAT, prepared for it for years and everything. And then I just felt myself stuck. Like I couldn't take that next step of literally just sending in my applications to these universities that I was pretty sure I was going to get into.
Yeah.
Right? Because I had a pretty good resume at the time. And so after that, I just kind of felt this awkwardness, right, of like just not wanting to do that. Like I just didn't want to go down that, you know, traditional path. And that kind of put me on this science communication journey. You know, I've been an entrepreneur for 7 years. And, you know, it was really just following that, like, feeling of being off. And so I know when I have that feeling that things aren't right, that I need to separate myself from everybody. Like, I need to tune out all the noise, reduce my consumption of social media content, and just naturally gravitate to the stuff that feels right. And so I did this in a cheap way, you know, before I started my first job. And this time, you know, Thailand is actually a really affordable country when it comes to the conversion rates of the dollar and things like that. And so I knew, look, I closed down my studio, Fascinate House in Los Angeles, packed all my stuff into storage in my apartment, and I just booked a one-way trip, man. So I went out there, and again, I created that separation, bought a single backpack. And so I'm like going to different hostels, staying in a couple of hotel rooms. It was all relatively affordable, you know, being from the U.S.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was just able to hear myself again, you know, and so turned down a lot of work opportunities and things like that. And I think I just started to hear myself think, you know?
Yeah. That is drawing me back to the signal to noise metaphor. It's like the noise, it got to the point where you don't know if what you're seeing is signal or it all looks the same and you don't know what to take information from. So it sounds like you were able to reduce the noise a little bit and get a better picture of the signal there.
Yeah.
And which is, I think that it's something that's so important to do because over time, the noise, it just adds up and it gets hard, you know, as we continue to live our lives to know, like, what is the direction that I'm supposed to be going in?
The noise gets louder, and that voice in you is a whisper, you know? And so sometimes it feels like you just have this thing in you, but you can't hear it. And you just have to lower that external volume so that whisper can start speaking. I was training with like martial artists and Muay Thai fighters.
I remember seeing that.
Yeah, man. I lived in a fighting camp for like 8 days. And so we had to camp and then we like walked to the school and trained twice a day for like 2 hours every day.
Yeah.
And it was a simple life, man. I had, you know, food there. Everything was kind of taken care of. And I just like heard myself think again. And I came back invigorated, you know, like part of living that backpacker lifestyle has kind of made me nomadic. And I'm still technically a digital nomad right now. And it kind of there's some growing research about like the scientifically supported research about getting out of your comfort zone, doing things that are hard on a consistent basis, and kind of like reinvigorating yourself in that way. And there's some emerging neuroscience research. I'd love for a neuroscientist to fact check this, by the way. But it's a part of the brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. And it's essentially supposed to correlate, the size of it is supposed to correlate with how much willpower we have, like our ability to overcome adversity.
Interesting.
And allegedly, there's scientific studies that correlate this willpower, right, which can be honed through working out and doing hard things, having a challenging day, also going to be associated with the will to live. Right, and so if someone is hospitalized, maybe unconscious, but they have that, largely well-developed anterior mid-cingulate cortex, they might be more likely to survive. And again, I want to make sure a neuroscientist fact checks me on this. I want to be out here spreading misinformation.
That sounds right to me. When you think about,
it feels right, right?
When you think about developing a habit that's difficult, maybe it's like going to the gym or working on something because you want to develop this skill. It is hard at first. There's a lot of resistance, but as you do it, it does become easier. And I can only imagine, also not being a neuroscientist, I can only imagine that corresponds, the ease at which things can now be done corresponds with some change inside your brain.
Yeah.
Like something must be different physically.
It does really feel like it. Like last year I ran the LA Marathon, and I remember like training for that for 6 months. And, I felt like, at one point in training, I ran up to 20 miles on a weekend, right? And this is like, I can't even fathom doing that right now. But it felt like I could also translate that into other aspects of my business, especially when I was doing stuff that didn't feel totally aligned. It was hard every day, but I just had more patience. I could like endure, better. It really did feel that way.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. A lot of people tend to get into running as time goes, and everybody loves it. I got a bad knee. I can't run.
Facts,
I don't chase. I track. I'm not running after nothing. And people, I think that there's a real human need to have something in the future that your eyes are on, and something like an event like a marathon, even just running, right? Because you're running to run for the day, but that's a goal, and there's like something real about having that, and and people who do it, they love it. Runners love it. They'll run until they wreck their knees.
Oh yeah, we're all masochists. We're 100% masochists.
And there's something there about being human and having a direction that you're going in. And, we could think of goals as milestones or markers. And it's never, when you cross that, you're not done, right? You kind of gotta keep going. You don't have to run yourself into the ground or anything. And obviously
but you don't chase your goals. You just attract them.
You can't. Yeah, you can't.
No, but
you wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand. This is you wouldn't understand this.
But you have that in you too, though, man. Like I remember you were working out like 7 days a week for how many days?
Okay, no. So this was interesting. So about a year or two ago, I thought that I was gonna really challenge myself because I'm also the same way. Like I believe that improvement as a human comes at facing challenges, period, at facing your fears. This is how I move. And I said, I'm going to challenge myself to work out every single day for a year, a 365 challenge. And first month, 2 months, I'm killing it. I'm feeling better than ever.
It's getting pretty swole there, too.
Oh, man. I'm literally as good a shape as I've been in since I was playing ball back in Kentucky. And everybody is messaging me, and they're like, hey, man, you got to slow down there. You got to take some rest days. I'm like, you got to take some rest days. I don't need to take any rest days. It took about 3 or 4 months of working out every day to start to accumulate this overall fatigue. And I was like, oh, I probably should include some recovery days in here. And then I started doing it like some stretching days, some walking days, some Pilates, some yoga days. But it was far too late. I was at an unsustainable rate. I think at about day 1, I think I made it 180 or 190, which is still a lot.
That's crazy, yeah.
I wear that with a badge of honor. But I had several overuse injuries. I had strained something in my bicep, my forearm, my lower back. I was like, So Yeah, I learned my lesson. I learned my lesson. I humbled myself. Everybody was right. You know, rest is important. Rest is important. But doing that, it does something for you.
Yeah.
You know, knowing that you're accomplishing, that you're taking steps towards this thing, it feels amazing. So yeah, I've scaled back now. I'm like at 3 to 4 times a week max. I take my rest days.
But you're sustaining it, right?
Yeah.
But you know what actually this reminds me of? So after your dissertation, right, I remember I texted you, right? You had all these viral videos coming out. And I was like, yo, man, and we were talking about starting this. And I was like, yo, man, I know it's going to be a lot of work to do, and you probably want to sit down, relax, and celebrate. Literally at the exact same time, you texted me like, we should meet early next week. I was like, dang, this dude, what is going on?
Yeah.
Like, so it seems like you also have a balance, right? It's like, yes, you understand the importance of self-care, but there's this other side, right? But like, how do you, like, where is that balance lie for you?
Yeah. I think you have to have discernment about yourself and your energy levels, what you can keep up, when you can put your foot on the gas, when you maybe need to let off a little bit. And that's very person dependent. So it's hard to tell other people what that should be. But I know that I had a lot of people telling me that I should like take a break and bask in it. But I was feeling so motivated to work on this, more motivated than I have in years. And as somebody who's creative, I know that the waves of inspiration, creativity, curiosity, they come and go. And when you feel it, when you feel energized for that thing, you gotta ride it.
Step
you
on
don't,
it.
yeah.
Yes.
You don't want to lose that energy. You don't want to lose that momentum. And so, you know, this is something that I was pumped to dig into more, especially because I was able to ease up on the energy that I was dumping into my dissertation, and can put it in a little bit of a different direction. So yeah, I mean, I definitely have that drive. And that's something that I also don't want to be shy about telling people that ask me, hey, like, how did you get through grad school? How do you get through doing a PhD? How do you stay motivated for a decade? And it's, you know, you're going to have to turn up sometimes. You're going to have to lock in sometimes. You're going to have to do it sometimes when you don't want to. You may have to go on short stints that are unsustainable. But if it's a short stint, it doesn't have to be sustainable. It just needs to be sustainable for a short period of time. And sometimes that's the way it is. And you can't be afraid of that or shy away from that. But it's all about the discernment, right?
Yeah. No, I get it, man. I think I'm also a victim of my own curiosity in that way.
Yeah.
You know, it feels like, you know, I have a question that's unanswered and I like gotta get the answer. Like,
Yeah.
You know, oh, well, what if we did this? Like, what if we started this podcast? I can't then like wait 6 months, right? Like I feel this strong energy that like makes me have to manipulate the universe into getting this thing to see what the answer is. I need to figure this out.
Yeah, it's like, and you know, an idea, especially in creation, an idea is it's a living thing, right? And when the thing is small, you're gonna feed it, you're gonna foster it, you're gonna take care of it, help it grow, or it's gonna die.
Right.
And even if you have the idea again in the future, and you're like, oh, I'll revisit it, it's not the same one. It's different. So you can do it again. You want to write a book, you can put it off for 2 years. You can still write a book in 2 years. It won't be the same one, right? It's different. It's a different thing. So, you know, we got to take care of our creative ideas.
Yeah, and here we are doing that in full circle moment, right, man?
Yeah.
Well, hey, man, since this is our first episode, I think we should wrap up with the question that we're going to ask every guest.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you first, man. What question do you wish you would have asked yourself sooner?
It's such a great question. With what I know now, what do I wish that I would have asked myself sooner? I would have to say that an important question for me is, what is truly important to me? Like what really matters to me? Because at times throughout my life, throughout this journey, even before I got into studying science, so much of what I valued, I think, was suspiciously aligned with what it seemed like everybody else valued. That shouldn't be the case. Obviously, there's going to be overlaps in the values that we have with other people in a society, but the things that are important to society in general, they really shouldn't be the things that are important to an individual that has assessed their values, morals, ethics, and decided what success looks like for them. So I wish that earlier on, and even still now from time to time, that I could be a little more exacting in the definition of what is truly important to me.
It's bars, man.
So I gotta bounce the question right back to you. What is the question that you wished you asked yourself earlier in life?
So, I think that I spent most of my career in a reactionary state, making things to solve quick problems, and they're not sustainable. And so the question that I wish I had asked myself was, what am I building that's really going to stand the test of time? And anything that I'm trying to build now, I want to make sure is going to live for 10 years or more, right? Ideally outlive me. And those are the things that sometimes require slowness. They require intentionality. They require separation.
Yes.
And a lot of us are going to be stuck in this hamster wheel, just in a reactionary way, just building things that we think solve temporary problems.
Yeah.
But I'm on that generational legacy track.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Definitely. And that's big too. The patience and time. This is something that is lost on all of us today, trying to go viral, trying to hit it big, invest in the right crypto that's going to make you a millionaire overnight. And it's that to build something that you can trust and that lasts, it takes time. There's no way around that.
Facts.
You can't sprout up a mansion overnight. It takes time to lay the foundation, and that's something that nobody wants to hear. And it's not fun to face that on that. Hey, this may take years.
Yeah,
but that's true.
I'm willing to put some years into this, man.
Yeah,
I'm willing to do it. Yeah.
Same, man. I'm all in.
All right. Well, thank you so much, man. This has been Curiosity Theory, and hopefully y'all tune in to the next one.
Absolutely. Yep. Take care.